Hey, bro, do you remember the name of the girl from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid?
The girl
Yeah?
from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid?
Uh-huh.
I think her name might be Miss Kobayashi.
No, that's too obvious. And besides, isn't Kobayashi a kind of beef?
No, you're thinking of Kobe beef.
Oh, we got beef? Yeah, we got beef. Well, then you better square up, because I'm my mama. I'll knock you the...
The Lunar New Year arrives this Saturday. If you're watching this video after then that sucks for you, unless you're watching it all the way around to next year. But by that point, it will be out of date because we'll be moving into the year of the snake. But this year is exciting because we're moving into the year of the dragon. Of course, it's not literally the year of the dragon, it's Long Nyen, but Nyen is translated as year and Long is translated as dragon. But did you ever stop to think about how weird that is? Most of the time, when we encounter a new concept, we don't try to fit it within the paradigms of our own society, we just use another language's word for it. But not so with dragons. We've instead just extended it to mean any sort of snake or lizard like animal, and then we act surprised when Chinese and English dragons are nothing alike. So, in order to describe all the dragons that occur worldwide, we first need a stricter definition of dragon. The one I came up with is any sort of lizard or snake that is abnormally large. I will extend it to include the tuatara, so any sort of lepidosauramorph that exhibits gigantism. Let's go. To begin with, it's probably relevant to mention the non-mythological creatures that fit that description. The lepidosaurs are not very familiar with gigantism. That would be the archosaurs, their cousins, hence dinosaurs. But during the Pleistocene epoch, many animals tried to fill the power vacuum left by the extinct dinosaurs, including the extinct Titanoboa and Megalania. The remaining squamates are much smaller, although we still call this one a dragon. Only one, the king of the Cretaceous Ocean, managed to exist during the dinosaurs, that being the mosasaurs, who extended well past 50 feet long, but that's not what you're here for. The classic Western dragon, like all mythological creatures, was popularized by D&D and Lord of the Rings. It originally stems from Celtic mythology and was attested in Beowulf and the legend of St. George, and elements were added by the Slavic dragons, such as their propensity for kidnapping marriageable young women and occasionally their multiple heads, and possibly Python, the dragon snake from Greek mythology. Ironically, despite its appearance, it would give its name to a snake. And even more ironically, the Drakon, which would give its name to more python like dragons, was much more snake like, similar to the traditional Germanic dragon, or worm. A worm is just a simple dragon with a long, thin like body, and there's not much to say about this one, as you can imagine. The simplest kind of dragon across the world is just big snake. The worm also gave rise to the lindworm, a worm with front limbs, and later even back limbs, too. This can be observed to have occurred over time in tandem with the Christianization of Europe. The lindworm also gives us the common feature of dragons hoarding gold and even gaining their power from it. In the myths, the dwarf Fafnir was transformed into a lindworm from excessive greed. The lindworm was further derived into the French guivre, or English wyvern, which has 2 wings and 2 legs, but no arms. Like I said, the Greek dragon is more snake-like, but it's sometimes depicted with wings. The Greek salamander is smaller and probably an amphibian, but let's talk about the Christians. In the Bible, there are 2 words translated as dragon, tanin and tanim. Tanim is the plural of jackal, and it's just a mistaken translation. Taninim are more like sea serpents with no legs. Across the world, many dragons have much more watery connotations, and that begins by going aquatic. There's also some mention in the book of Revelation, but I should warn you, this book is heavily metaphorical and not describing real myths. The dragon representing Satan is big, red, has 7 heads, 10 horns, and exhales frogs. There's also Leviathan and Behemoth, but I find it more likely that those are archosaurs or stem reptilia. While we're on the topic of polycephaly, let's hit on the Hydra. The Hydra is a snake with 9 heads that all grow back when they're cut off. The Basque Herensuge is also a snake with 7 heads. Staying in the Middle East, the Babylonians had a dragon called the Marduk, a snake with a lion's front limbs and a falcon's back limbs. The Hittite Iluyanka was a giant water serpent who tried to fight the gods. However, his name literally means eel, so I'm gonna say he isn't a reptile. Similarly, the Persian basilisk and cockatrice and the surprisingly similar Hungarian sarkany aren't large enough to be dragons. Abzu and Tiamat, who appear sporadically across Mesopotamia, were both snakes of uncertain form, naturally possessing water powers, and Tiamat's counterpart Bahamut held up the world tree. But he is a fish. Fortunately, the Manipuri Taurinai is a snake, and with that, we move on to India. The Nagar and Lamia are both humans with a snake of a tail. Dang it! Nagar and Lamia are both humans with the tail of a snake. I think you'd be grasping if you referred to them as dragons. They are half human, after all, and practically speaking, when you chop someone in half, one half is going to be much more than the other. Lamia in particular are more like humans with snake tails than snakes with human torsos. They have all the mammalian characteristics: hair, mammalian jaw, mammalian neck, fleshy lips, snitties, and this lady's got her whole cheeks out, so I'm betting that she doesn't even have a cloaca. Some others that fit that mold are the Afro-Caribbean lua. The Solomon hatui bladi is similar, but it has bat wings, 4 eyes, and occasionally 4 breasts. For Nagas, it's harder to get a straight answer on what they look like because the word Naga just means snake in Sanskrit, so it's been used to refer to a number of different mythological creatures all across South and Southeast Asia. The Hinduist interpretation is very similar to the Lamia, but a 7-headed cobra is also popular, much more common in Buddhism because of Muchalinda, who guards the Buddha. In Thailand and Laos, they would only have one head as well as tacking on a horn, as seen in Raya and the Last Dragon. Don't blame me. A lot of the research I did was just Southeast Asian people tearing into the accuracy of this movie. For that reason, we now move down to Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. The Javanese Naga have crowns and potentially wings. The Malaysian Naga is another typical sea serpent, and the Philippine Naga, Bakunawa, is a more fishy serpent that eats the moon. That's only in the north, though. In the south, the Markupo resembles a tusked snake with a forked tail, red crest, and barbed tongue. In Myanmar, Nagas predate Buddhism practiced by the Naga people, although they still resemble the Thai and Lao Nagas, and the Vietnamese Naga is more or less a Chinese dragon with 2 horns and sharp fangs. In fact, its name, Rome, is borrowed directly from Chinese. People like to scream all over that, the Chinese dragons are actually a lot different than Western dragons, and this is true in what they represent, but in terms of physiology, the only real difference is that they don't have wings, and some of them do have wings. The full description of a Chinese dragon is that they possess the antlers of some sort of cervid, the head area of a camel, the eyes of a demon or possibly a hare, the body of a snake, the belly of a clam, the scales of a fish, the feet of a tiger but the claws of an eagle, and the ears of some kind of bovid. And thousands of years of art have solidified that description. They also sometimes have a diamond. The Persian Ajdaha falls into a similar shape, but with a lion mane and a more fish-like mouth. Japan, Korea, and Mongolia, much like Vietnam, constantly live in the shadow of China, and their dragons are much the same, with one major change. The Chinese dragons always have 5 claws, but Korean and Mongolian dragons only get 4. In Japan, 3 is lucky, so they go with 3 claws. The Bhutanese dragon, of course, follows suit, but they insist they did it first. There's also Orochi of Yamato, a giant 8-headed, 8-tailed snake, and the Ikuchi, a colossal sea serpent that exudes sticky goo over a ship and causes it to capsize if you can't clean it up constantly. Mongolia also has the Mongolian deathworm, which is definitely just a worm, not a lizard. A lot of eastern dragons also have some sort of power over water. One such creature is the giant snake Vritra, only he uses his powers to withhold water rather than bestow it. He's from India, and I didn't mention him earlier because the Naga section flowed so nicely. Moving over to Central Asia, a statue in Bishkek depicts the hero Manas fighting a dragon, which resembles a Persian dragon but without legs. In the actual myth, however, these serpents can have up to 60 or 100 heads, although the epic has not been properly translated because it is 20 times longer than the Odyssey and Iliad combined and written entirely in Kyrgyz. Another dragon is the Evren, which is much larger, with the head and 4 limbs of a predator, probably a wolf, and some sort of wings, probably an eagle. This one is also famous for dwelling in the underworld beneath the Turkic world tree and gnawing at the roots. Now, where have we seen that before? Nidhogr in Norse mythology is exactly the same in purpose, but he isn't all that different from the typical Germanic worm. In the Gylfaginning, he's even introduced among many other dragons using the blanket term serpents, which is literally translated as ormur, which is the same word as worm. But Nidhogr is not the only major Norse serpent. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, is a massive snake that encircles the world, and critically puts its tail in its mouth, which is not unique to it. The Ouroboros is depicted as a self-consuming snake, although it can have legs, as well as the Australian hoop snake. But a lot of these aren't giant, which means that they aren't a dragon by my definition. 2 more world-ending snakes are the Albanian Kulshedra, who has 7 heads, and the Egyptian Apep, or Apophis, who devours the sun. Other Egyptians include Nehebkau, who's a guy, and Wadiet, a goddess appearing as a snake with wings. Some other snakes with wings include the Amphiptery, although that has wyvern wings rather than bird wings, the Chuvash dragon, who had to pray to Allah to get them, and the feathered serpents of Mesoamerica, Kulkulkan and Quetzalcoatl, are large plume snakes with wings that are covered in feathers. Okay, we're almost out of time, so let's do a full speed round. The Romanian Zmeu resembles a Celtic dragon but has human legs and arms. The Tatar Zilant is a wyvern with 2 heads. The South African grootslang looks like an elephant with a snake tail. The Sesotho monyohi is a big snake that can turn invisible. The Cuban Madre de Aguas has horns, a diamond, and can shapeshift. The Zulu Mamlambo is an alligator horse with a long neck, although the closer equivalent is more like a snake. The Cherokee Uktenar is another giant snake with horns. The Kwakwakatwak Sisutl is a snake with two snake heads and one human head. The Amphisbaena is similar, but not always as reptilian. The Incan Amaru is a snake with vulture wings, a llama head, fish tail, and deer horns. It sometimes also has multiple heads, those of a mountain lion or condor. The Seminole Stuckwanaya and the Hopi Koloisi are sea serpents with a horn that makes you horny. The Huron Angaunt is venomous and has four legs. The Shawnee Kinepequa is giant and does ecdysis. The Mayan Coatlicue has two snake heads but is a human. And the Hawaiian Mo'o is the Pokemon Salazzle. The Maori Tanifa looks more like a sea serpent with two front legs. The Aboriginal Australian rainbow serpent is a creator god. It's a gigantic rainbow snake, sometimes with a crocodile tail and kangaroo head. The Brazilian Ihuaivulu is a seven-headed fire breather that lives in a volcano. The Ecuadorian Iwanthi is a shapeshifter that can shapeshift from a snake into a slightly larger snake. And the Paraguayan Boitata is a fire snake that kills you if you do deforestation.